Assalamu alaikum dear students, welcome to Journalistic Writing. Today in this lecture we'll talk about column writing. This is another genre of journalistic writing. Before I move any further, I would like to revise a few important points of feature writing. If you remember, in our last class we talked about feature and its different types. And we also talked about, the structure of a feature and how to write featured lead and then collect sportive details and then, moving then towards to nut graph and then, closing, and how to, tackle with the, direct quotes and how to put the whole body of the feature together. I mean, the sequence and the progression, elements, or you can say the coherence and the cohesion, like, of the whole, feature body. In this, lecture, of course, we'll focus on defining feature and then types of features and then how features are written, I mean, the writing process of feature thing. And again, one very important aspect of feature, how to begin, because of course, starting is important, beginning is everything, then onwards, like, things become easier. So I'll focus on how to open your column also. There is a ruling impression and a ruling voice actually, about columns, that these are columns actually which sell, newspapers. Now, how much this is truthful or how much it's not, we'll of course find out later on, but I also probably would say that yes, these are columns, which sell newspapers. As it is said that, of course, three things, this news reports and editorial and then, columns, and they say that the heart of newspaper, of course, is the news report, and the soul of newspaper, of course, is the editorial, and the personality of, newspaper, of course, is the column. Why columns, sell newspapers, or why we call columns, as personality of newspapers? Now, look here, reports are written by, news reports are written by, reporters, news reporters. Editorial is written by editorial board. You can say senior most, editors of the newspapers, or you can say, in certain cases, the owners or the owner, like, of newspaper. Features are written also by, news reporters. You can also call them news reporters, and you can also call them, feature writers, but practically speaking, of course, they are, reporters. Columns are not written by reporters, actually. Or columns are not written by, the editorial board. Columns are not written by insiders. Columns are written by outsiders. I mean, the way we say man is known by the company he keeps, then the company of newspapers, that's what makes actually the personality of the newspaper, and that's what actually makes, newspapers, sell. I mean, columns are written by some renowned, prolific writers. Columns are written by poets also. Columns are written by analysts as well. They are written by specialists of their respective fields. They are written by businessmen. They are written by, academicians actually, the technocrats actually. So columns actually create the whole, insiders and outsiders, and that insider-outsider together actually is the company, and together actually is the personality, which it, these columns, give to the newspapers. We have two, opinion writings in, newspapers. One is editorial, is also opinion writing, and column is another opinion writing. But of course, like this editorials, they reflect the opinions, the points of views, the ideology, the policy, the stance, the paradigm, the goggles, the perception of the editorial board or the newspaper, in other words. Whereas column is the perception, ideology, policy, viewpoint of one single person who may or may not be from, that newspaper, who may be, someone outside of that newspaper. And at times, this is possible that, column's viewpoint, or you can say that columnist's viewpoint clashes with the viewpoint of the editorial, or it does not, go side by side with the ideology or the policy of the newspapers. But since that person, that columnist, is a big name, he is an authority, he has the right to hold his own opinion, therefore, newspapers, of course, they give him freedom to move, freedom to express. And of course, columnists, because by using this freedom, of course, they also collect around themselves their own, readership. The way like newspapers have their readership, exactly the same way, columnists, also have their readership. I mean, ask yourself, like, when you read Urdu or English, doesn't matter like which newspaper you read. Take the example of Urdu newspapers, when you read, of course, front page and back page you read, and then, of course, you move towards the op-ed page, I mean, opposite editorial page. There, like, you find tons of columns, every day you read. Maybe, like, you don't read every column. You only read Mr. ABC's column, which is printed once in a week, and you wait for the next week to read that column. So this is, or maybe like, you also go for clipping, you file those columns also. I like, one very important column, Noor-e Basirat, for example, like, of course, I used to clip for myself, for my own knowledge, for my own understanding. That was such a, I would say, such an important, column which could really tell you the spirit of Islam, tell you the spirit of Quran, tell you the spirit of Hadith and all. Such a wonderful thing. So people collect columns. And of course, they, columns, sometimes, make their appearance in the form of books also by like, those columnists. I mean, you don't find, reports, taking the form of books, or editorials taking the form of like, books, or articles. In some cases, of course, articles do come as books, but this is very common practice, These columnists, they do print the columns also. Who for they print? Of course, for that very readership, Now, let's compare this column and news, and then column and editorial. Of course, we've already done it. Let's compare column and news. What's the difference in these two? Of course, news is very objective. Column is totally subjective. Column is not objective, of course. But if there are some, news columns, then, of course, again, there will be a mix of objectivity and subjectivity. Whenever there's like the word news involved with any piece of writing, the element of objectivity has to be there. Or if not objectivity, the element of fairness is, very much there. But then, of course, subjectivity also. Why? Because columnists, they very proudly contaminate the objective elements of stories with subjective interpretations. I mean to say, those WH you give columnists, they are going to interpret the way they feel, the way they understand, This is what actually the beauty of column is. They make things easy, not for everybody actually. Please keep in mind, as I told you before, these are colonies actually. Colonies inside colonies, Newspaper itself is a colony, It has its own readership. Then inside these colonies, there are smaller colonies. And they are actually what? They are two. One colony, of course, is the editorial. There are like, people who only read editorials of certain newspaper, not of every newspaper. And they, of course, they make their opinion. They take ideas from. And the second types of colonies, columns. I mean, people, they read columns, they, borrow viewpoints and stands of the columnists, and this is how, like, they get, of course, affected by. Therefore, like this, as I was telling you before, like the difference in news and column. News is totally objective, column is, of course, subjective. At times, objective and subjective, mixture. Now, to give you a very practical difference, let's say there is a minister, ABC minister, and he has, made some mistakes, for example, And news, what news is going to do? News is going to report all those mistakes, which that minister, committed. See? What column or columnist will do? He will, of course, restate, rewrite all those, or re-mention those mistakes, what that minister committed. Plus, he may say, on the basis of those mistakes which he has committed, he should resign. Now, this is the subjective element, which he has contaminated the objective part of, that piece of information. In news reports, you will never find, this aspect of information that since he has done this thing wrong, so he should resign. No. This thing can appear, let's say, if there are some very bold, editorial board is very bold actually, and very brave actually, so they can use such stuff. Otherwise, it's only the space, the column space, where columnists, they can go to this level in which, they can be suggestive or instructive also. So this is very basic difference between news and, of course, this column. And editorial, I already explained you that editorial is written by not one person, written by a group of people which we call as editorial board, whereas column is written by one single person. And editorial is in 100% case on current news actually, whereas column can be written on current issues, and they can be written on a century-old issue. So that currency has different definition, for column. For editorial, of course, editorial is, let's say, yesterday's news becomes, an editorial. That's one possibility. For column, that's not the case actually. He can talk about yesterday's news, or he can talk about 100-year-old news, and can make and fill his column with. So this is how it's actually all about. What else? Now there are four. I have prepared for you a criteria. To call a piece of writing as column. I'm giving you this comparison, deliberately. We have discussed editorial, report, news report, feature also. So I'm giving you this comparison thing, so that you really understand how these genres, they differ from each other, and where they are similar. If these four pieces are the qualification of any piece, that piece of course can be called a column. Number one important feature of column is that it is a regular feature in a newspaper, number one. Number two, column is printed, unlike features. I told you before, feature cannot be on editorial page, even feature cannot be on opposite editorial page. Features are not on the front page, they can be on inside pages, they can be in supplements, in magazines. Columns are actually printed on, in most cases, in most instances, they are printed on opposite editorial pages, whereas they, possibility is that they can be dispersed on all, different places in the newspaper, but most possibly they have the fixed place, number one. So columns are written on a fixed place, number one. Number two, they are written under a fixed permanent name, number two. Number three, they are written, of course, with the name of the columnist. Number four, they are written with the picture of that columnist. And number five, electronic address of that columnist is also given. So that, people could directly approach that columnist and could share, their viewpoints, or they could record their reactions also. So these two important points. Number one, their regular feature. Number two, fixed place, fixed name, name of the columnist, picture of the columnist, electronic address. Editorials are not this way. Features are not this way. Features, of course, can have the name of the feature writer. Editorial is not going to have name of the editorial, because that's a collective activity actually. Reports can have the name of the reporter, but they're not going to have picture of the reporter, the address of the reporter. And report do not have fixed place. They are dispersed actually in all of the newspaper. Columns have the fixed space. Let's say ABC column always comes on the upper part of the page, and XYZ comes the lower part of the page. I mean, every week, every month, like, you know, their appearance is going to be the same one. So column readers actually, like, you know, they, of course, they know it, like which page they are going to go on which date or which week or which month, and they, like, you know, find that piece of writing, you know, available there. Another important thing about column is that it's a personality driven by the author. And the last one is it explicitly contains an opinion viewpoint of the columnist. So this is what actually the fundamental facts and figures, you know, about, you know, column writing and all. Let's now talk about different types of columns. Well, columns are of many different types. I mean, if I ask you, count the aspects of human life, if I ask you, like, you know, to take this pen and paper and start writing, you know, different aspects of human life, different, you know, interests, like, you know, human beings, you know, take their part in, believe me, the long list, probably it reaches to 40, 50, 60, like, you know, different aspects you can name. Same are the names of, you know, columns. But still, for our academic understanding, we can divide columns in 4 or 5, you know, types. The most important type of columns is, of course, the opinion columns. Editorials are also opinion writing, and exactly the same way columns are also, they can also be opinion columns. I mean, they can explain things, they can interpret things, you know, they can criticize things, they can persuade, they can praise. They can, of course, criticize government policies. They can criticize, you know, government actions, for example. They can, you know, let's say, praise some policies of the government, or, you know, of opposition, let's say, leaders. They can, you know, talk about the social, you know, attitudes, like the social behaviors, you know, people exhibit. They can also criticize them. They can praise them. See, to write opinion columns, we'll have to borrow the structure of editorial writing. If you remember, in editorial writing, I gave you a structure, and there was a mnemonic, you know, which I shared with you, and that was SPECS. This is written on your screen also, SPECS. Now here, S, if you remember, S was situation or problem. If you want to write an opinion column, very simple thing, in the first paragraph, you're going to describe or narrate a problem or the situation. In the second paragraph, what you will do, you will discuss your position as a columnist, that so-and-so is a problem, and what's your position. You are for the problem, or you are against, you know, that situation. Your stance, actually, or you are neutral. I mean, you take the third stance in which, you know, you say both are right or both are wrong, and you give, you know, the third, like, you know, viewpoint. That whatever, like, you know, it is, well, that's your position. Then in the third, you know, paragraph, whatever position, you know, you have taken. Now in the third paragraph, E stands for evidence. Now you will give evidence in the support of your stance, of your viewpoint, of your, like, you know, the side which you have chosen. This is what actually we call the real argumentation, you know. You can argue logically, assertively. Plus, you can use, you know, you can use sources, official and unofficial sources. I mean, you can quote people, you can quote great masters, or you can quote living legends, for example, their wordings, their viewpoints. Of course, those you are going to quote which elaborate your point of view, or which strengthen and support your point of view. This is what we call evidence paragraph. In the fourth, you know, paragraph, this paragraph is called actually contrast paragraph. C is actually for contrast. What you do in contrast? In contrast, you discuss the other side of the coin. Why you do it? So that people may not call that you are one-eyed person, or you are very partial person. You are not fair. You are not, you know, objective in your approach. You are not liberal. You are not broad-minded. You are not ready to listen others' viewpoint. So contrast is where you discuss the opposite viewpoint, but keep in mind, this is not discussing the way you are discussing your opinion. No, you discuss to refute it. You refute. No, refute means, you know, you, discussing that, you prove it wrong. This actually I mean by contrast. Not only you discuss the other side, other viewpoint, but you refute that. You prove it that this stands, this viewpoint is wrong. Now, the last alphabet in this mnemonic, the formula which I gave you, SPECS, is S, and S stands for solution. You do not end your column, here, that you give, of course, for situation or problem, then you, give what you call, evidence thing, your position, then evidence, then contrast, and the last one is, solution. At least 2 solutions, you should discuss. And this is also possible because this is not an objective writing, this is subjective one. You can even talk about the proposed solution, and even you can give the implementation, of that solution also. So this is how, opinion columns are written. Let's move towards our next type of column. This is called advisory columns. There are different examples of advisory columns. For example, medical, psychological, then columns about family feuds. The counselors are there, who you can discuss your family problems, and they can, give you some solutions. Then a career counseling for students, especially, and of course for job changers or for professional people. And then horoscope also. Now, advisory columns, of course, they are very much common, not only in newspapers, but also in, magazines. These are, of course, written by not ordinary, Tom, Dick or Harry. Of course, they are written by the specialists of that very field. If there are some medical, columns, of course, they will be written by, professional doctors. If there are some psychological columns, they will be written, of course, by, psychologists, let's say. And exactly the same way, all such, if they are column about, beauty tips, for example, they'll be written, of course, by beauticians, not by quacks, actually. Very important thing, you can, the format of these columns, actually, all which I enlisted in front of you, here the format is not argumentative one, the one we have for opinion. Here, format usually is question-answer. People send you questions. They can send directly questions to the editor, and then he can, of course, pass on to you. And then, of course, you study those questions analytically, and you try to suggest, possible solutions to, of course, your, in a way, clients, I would say. Make sure that whatever you suggest, instruct, or advise, that is on scientific grounds, accurate, and based on your possible professional judgment. If you do not know, at times, happens that you find some very complicated problems come on to you, which probably needs the assistance of rather some very senior person's opinion. So I would say that the justice is that, you do consult your seniors, and then, of course, taking their viewpoints, then you advise people. So this is how, advisory columns are usually written. Another important type which I, forgot to mention, some legal problems, of people, for example. There are some, legal columns on law, actually, people from every part of the country, they do discuss the, family feuds which need some, legal interpretations, for example. So then newspapers, they specially arranges, they arrange, some lawyers, for example, and they, of course, study those cases, and they then write solutions, and this is how, such columns are, written. So the most important thing is, of course, technically strong advice is the only, I would say, question which has to be answered most effectively. The next column type, of course, is religious columns. Very important one. Doesn't matter what religion, newspaper gives space to. You can give space to Islamic scholars. You can give space to the scholars of Christianity. You can give space to the scholars of, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism, whatever, is the religion, for example. So newspaper, of course, can give space to. And people of the respective communities, of course, they can write letters to those columnists, for certain religious matters, and of course they then write solutions for them. If we consider, let's say, Islamic columns, for example, so of course it must be in your knowledge also that there are some highly, I would say, recommendable columns in different local newspapers, English and Urdu both, which of course everybody, you also read those. Some Quranic teachings are there, teachings of ahadith and sunnah is there, and Islamic history is an important subject in those columns. And of course then comparative religious studies is another very important subject of discussion in those columns. And this is how these columns are. And the format of these columns, well, varies from I would say it's format to format. I mean to say it can be in question answer form, or it can be in descriptive form, or it can also be in expository form when you are comparing your religion with another religion. For example, in the case of comparative religious studies, then of course the format can be expository also, in which you try to discuss more than one religion, and you try to find out the similarities and the differences. So this is how these columns are written. The main purpose behind religious columns is to clarify the doubts actually which are in the minds of the people of different religions, so that people could be brought onto a common platform. And that actually should be the motto of these columns also, that tell people that look, these are similarities, and let's sit together on these similarities and walk together in different realms of life. So that should be actually the motto. And of course I believe this motto of course is chosen and adopted by newspapers. Then comes what? Humorous columns. Very important one, but keep in mind there is one caution towards humorous columns, that humor is of course unique. Humor is not common. I mean to say, something which is humorous for you may not be humorous for me, or something which is for me may not be for you. So don't try humor this way. Try to be on the safer side. Go for the polished and I would say educated humor discussed with people, so that people could understand the point you want to talk about through this genre. At times we feel that there are certain matters of life which perhaps we cannot discuss through serious narrations or descriptions. So we adopt this genre, humorous genre, and through humors, through joke, through fun, we discuss such points, and we give people for a minute food for thought, that there are certain problems which need some quick of course resolutions and all. Then another important type of columns, entertainment columns, and there's a long list of entertainment columns. For example, travelogues, columns about traveling. I mean, the columnist ABC, let's say was on a trip to Europe, for example. He comes back and in episodes starts writing all his experiences and his observations. So these are called travelogue columns. Then comes fashion and trends, very common these days in newspapers and magazines. Music reviews, film reviews, TV reviews, and another very, very in columns these days about cookery, in which different chefs, for example, they of course discuss different recipes and all that. So these are columns about entertainment. How to write columns now? Let's talk about. Well, again the same six-stage, six-step writing process, which we have already studied separately, plus we also discussed it indirectly when we talked about editorial writing. Again the same 6 points. Number 1, invention. Number 2, collection, organization, and then drafting, of course, then revising, and then proofreading. These are 6 steps we are going to follow for column writing also. But here for column writing, the first step is very important. That is, of course, invention. Invention means, in this step, you invent what you're going to write about, actually. Here, you're going to choose a topic, and you are going to assign it an angle. Choosing a topic, of course, you know that the topic is the one which is narrowed down to its best form, which I again gave you an example in my last class also. So narrow down your topic and then give it an angle. Angle actually means what you want to do with this topic. I mean to say, do you want to persuade people? You have some point of view and you want to convince people that they also choose and select your point of view, or you want to clarify things, or you want to, there are some complicated issues and you want to interpret them in such a way that would really simplify, define things for, or you want to educate people, or simply you want to inform them or startle them, So these are angles you are going to give to your topics. And this also is the purpose of your column as well. Another important thing you should keep in mind, audience. Of course, all, as I told you before, columns are like, colonies inside the colonies. So, of course, all columnists, they have their respective, very individualized sort of, readership or readers, okay? So, all columnists, they should try to, first of all, primarily write columns for those, readers, regular readers, and then, of course, for the mass readership also. So you have to ask yourself who you are writing to and for, and what they expect from you. There has to be consistency, in columnist, stance. There should not be any contrast. There should not be any dichotomy, what you talked about in last month's column, and now you are yourself negating and refuting. This dichotomy actually is not, digestible by your readers. So try to have consistency in your viewpoint, and then, of course, be insistent to it, and, of course, show persistency. So this is how, you keep on expanding your space bubble. And then comes, the content. What type of material you're going to use for your column and for your topic and, of course, for your reader. Look, selecting content primarily should depend upon the nature of your topic. I mean, do not, like in feature writing, we talked about, selecting procedures for your feature. I mean, there are different, resources from where you'll be collecting information for your feature. Exactly the same way, do not misuse procedures for your writing. I mean, if someone, Mr. ABC as columnist, always uses quotations, for example, in his columns, and you, as a copycat, try to use those. Look here, your topic should decide, do you need quotations in your column? Or if there are some fact files, someone always uses fact files, for example, or someone always starts his column from, let's say, an anecdote, or from a story, or from a narration. So you start copying that, that format, or that, organization. I would suggest you strongly not have your own style, and then, of course, stick to it like anything. As I told you before, persistency, you have to show not only in your approach, in your viewpoint, in your organization, and in your format also. So maybe something is good for ABC and may not be good for you. So try to be very careful about the content thing. Not every time all types of contents, can be part of your column. Sometimes, only one procedure you can adopt. I mean, you can only depend upon your own ideas, that would sell like anything. At times, if it's the nature of it's the demand of your topic that you have some quotations also, some fact file also, and start from some narration, then I, of course, don't stop you. Go ahead. But your topic is going to decide what content you're going to choose for. And, of course, the last thing is the structure, which I was telling you before, how to organize your information. That's important. And then, of course, comes collection. The information you're going to collect information which is strictly in relation with your topic and its prompts. Dear students, if you remember, all topics, they have their prompts. Prompts are aspects. And how do we get these prompts? Of course, by knowing about the keywords present in our topic. They are the prompts, they are the aspects. They all have to be answered, when we, of course, go about and finish our, column writing. Then comes organization. It has to be, of course, again, topics are going to decide organization, but plus there is going to be consistent. There are columnists, let me tell you this when we say organization. There are columnists. Every column, select their 20 columns, you would see every column has the same opening. I mean, some columnists, of course you know them, they always start their columns by some personal experience or by some borrowed experience or by some story which we call as, narration. And then slowly they move towards actual, the gist of the stuff, like, they want to talk about, and this is how, like, they lead their audience, of course, towards the end part of it, where, of course, they hammer by suggesting things. This is what actually I was saying, permanent feature of your column. But sometimes this permanent feature is suicidal, actually. Why? Because your topic demands something else, and you then, of course, have to violate your own, chosen, let's say, age-old, format type. You, of course, you have to satisfy first the topic, and then, of course, your personal choice, of course. Then, of course, comes drafting thing, which is writing, and then comes, revising. Of course, you revise. Revision is very important. Good writers are those who are good rewriters. This is my advice for you. Good writers are those who are good rewriters. Writing is what? Write, and then rewrite and rewrite. People who do not believe in rewriting it means, perhaps like, they even do not know, sorry to say, the ABC of writing, Writing actually is, good writer is the one who is a good rewriter. That's something important thing. And then comes, of course, why you rewrite, of course, you check the facts and figures which you have quoted, you check the quotations which you have quoted, you check the references. Have you given all the references with those quotations? Have you given all the citations also? Have you quoted names properly? All that stuff, like, you recheck. And then comes, proofreading. Proofreading is important. You proofread spellings, you proofread, of course, names, you proofread, the years, you proofread all the mechanics, all that stuff. So this is how, like, you start and you finish, your column writing. Very important part of now column writing I'm going to take you towards, that is how to open, your column. That's important thing. The one I have already discussed with you, that there are, like, columnists who always start their columns from stories. By the way, there are some 7, 8, different styles of opening, and don't restrict yourself to one, okay? I mean, keep on varying it. I mean, today choose the first type of style, tomorrow you can choose a second one. Who should decide? Primarily your topic is going to decide, and then, of course, your personal choice. On your screen, I have given you the first type of opening, that's called epigraph or quotation. As the word name itself, suggests, you can start your column from a quotation. Quotations are also, known as, of course, that lights from various lamps. These are sages of the ages, and, like, their words when you quote. My advice is, quotations are at their own places, of course, perfect pieces to always, like, seek after. But make sure that the quotation which you choose is leading one. That quotation is sort of, it has the quality of a caption one. It can cap up your column. I mean, when people read that quote, they could understand in full the behavior, the theme, the mood, the pulse of the whole story you are going to talk about. So this is, opening number 1, which is what you can start from an epigraph or from a quotation. Style number 2 is what? Concession. What is concession opening or concessional opening? Now, this is, I believe, very, I would say, a good one. I recommend you strongly. And this, first of all, let me explain what concessional opening is. Concessional opening means that this finding out the similarities, actually. Let's say I have let's talk about, the smoking. Let's say the problem is, should smoking be banned at public places or not? And I'm, writing something on it. Of course, there will be two parties. One party will say, yes, should be banned. at least at public places. Another party says, no, it shouldn't be. Let's say these are two groups. Let's say I belong to the one who says it should be, banned. Now, concessional opening is that you not straight away, you refuse the other group or the other party or the other side. Rather, you find out the similarities. Similarities means, similarities between me and my opponents. And those similarities, actually, I start my column from. This is called concessional opening. The word also tells you something. Give concession. When you give concession, actually, what you do? You share compassion. When you share compassion, what you do actually? You share space. Sharing space actually means saying yes to everybody, but at the same time, sticking yourself to your own point of view. It shows how liberal, how broad-minded, how educated, how groomed, how worldly wise you are. Concessional openings reflect these aspects of your personality. Therefore, one example I would like to show you of concessional opening, then of course we'll move ahead. On your screen you can see wonderful example of concessional opening. I think you are quite right. Now this is opening actually, opening of the column. I think you are quite right. Gun control legislation in Canada needs to be tightened to prevent us from becoming as violent as our neighbors to the south. However, now this is, first he agreed, he found out, he studied the other group's viewpoint, and he found out the similarities, and he started his column from the similarities. And after expressing those similarities, now he is giving his own viewpoint. And what is that? However, I don't think your proposal goes far enough. We need also to, and dig the remaining, parts of your column. So this is what actually concessional opening is. Let's go to the third, type of opening, which we call as narrative or hypothetical example. This is what actually I have already discussed with you, that there are some columnists, who always open their, columns from stories. And at the same, in the same, type of column opening is hypothetical. Hypothetical means, what if? When you bring your readers in a hypothetical situation, like supposing. Such columns, they always start from supposing. Like in Urdu, farz kijiye. Agar aise hota. Like supposedly, okay? Or what if situations. And then, of course, they, take you towards the realism and all. Examples of narrative opening and hypothetical opening, for your understanding. Like on your screen, you can see, when I was 7 years old, I remember being at the Marine Land Park in Niagara Falls, wondering how such a big whale could be happy in such a small pool. Starting from a story, and now starting from a hypothetical situation. Second example, if we do not introduce tougher restrictions on assault weapons, our city streets will become a war zone for gangs, drug deals, and drive-by shootings, much like our southern neighbors. Here, what if is a situation, and then onwards, of course, writer will develop his own stance. Next opening is question or a set of questions. You can ask question, your readers, lots and lots of questions. And then in your column, you would answer, those questions. Or if not, you can ask thematic questions, which we also call as, if you remember, we studied in persuasive writing, rhetorical devices. So in rhetorical devices, we ask rhetorical questions. Why we ask rhetorical questions? Not for answers to get from readers, actually, but to involve them. So this is another strategy, which you can open your column from. Next one is, striking fact or statistics. Such facts which are startling, which are striking, which are very critical, which are eye-opening. You can start your column from those facts, and of course you will grab your readers' attention, and then you can move, you can take them further. Next opening is paradox. Paradox means when you begin with a statement that seems absurd but may be true. For example, if you say that parents must be cruel to be kind. Now, this is actually a paradoxical situation. It looks a bit absurd. I mean, it of course gives you an idea of child abuse, that parents must be cruel to be kind. Actually, when you try to have discipline in your home, so all parents, of course, like, they are supposed to be at times, cruel, of course, for certain, like, principles, for certain rules, actually, which you set for your, of course, house, and for your, of course, home building. And then, that cruelty actually is a teacher's cruelty. Of course, teachers are not cruel, but they are little, like, cruel, of course, for their kindness in the real sense of the word. So that also is one possibility that, you start your columns from. I would like to, like, illustrate this point with the help of an example, that if writing a paper on disciplining children in the home, you might begin by arguing that, the same example, parents must be cruel to be kind. At a first glance, this may seem to endorse child abuse. However, a more detailed discussion in your paper might reveal your belief that in order to help children grow into responsible adults, rules in a household must be followed. You are not necessarily endorsing physical punishment. Instead, you might be endorsing grounding the child. So this is how, like, you can. Next, our opening for column is background information. Starting from the background, coming, of course, to the present. That's another very easy and but, of course, interesting one. We use background opening there, where it's very important for the readers to know first the background, to know first the past developments, and then they could talk about the current situations and all. So there, like, of course, it will be really, really fruitful. Eighth one is analogy. Analogy means, when you offer striking comparison, between two things, and through that comparison and contrast, you explain situations, to your readers. That's another very nice way of, like, opening. In a way, like, simplifying complex things, through analogies, of course, through illustrations, of course, you can simplify facts for your readers. Another very nice one is definitions. You can start from definitions, but please keep one very important thing in mind. Do not write dictionary definitions for your columns to start. Actually, if you have, if you have selected, for example, some dictionary definitions, for opening, make sure have a technical definition also. You can, of course, consult some technical material. You can talk to some resource persons, and you can, of course, get the real definitions, from them. And after quoting dictionary definition, then you can, of course, move towards the real technical, the subject definition, of that matter. And then, of course, you can move forward. The last one, of course, is humor. Starting your column from humor. This is also very common these days. It's useful also. You can teach through humor those things which, of course, you can't teach through some serious narrations and descriptions. So it's useful. My advice, again, is the same, that make sure that your humor is on common grounds. The one, like, which is educated one, which everybody, like, could appreciate in the real sense. Now, let's talk about do's and don'ts of column. This is important thing in going towards the end of our today's lecture. First of all, do's. I'll take you back towards the screen, and there, like, I have enlisted, some do's and some don'ts. I would like, your attention in here. First of all, give the reader timely, helpful information. Number 2, develop a structure and keep it. Write on a regular schedule. Number 3, write simple and short sentences and paragraphs. Number 4, in personal columns, use local names and places. Number 5, let others speak for you by use of quotes and references. It's the same thing, quoting words from other writers, from other resource persons, but make sure that, you give citations. You do tell these are not your words, these are words of so-and-so person, so that, you may not be a victim of plagiarism. And then, 6th one, learn the difference between a column and a news story, which, of course, I have already explained you. Let's now move towards the don'ts of a column. Number 1, do not use technical or complex words. Of course, your motto, your aim is clarity. Your motto is, your aim is to share information, okay? Therefore, like, you got to be very, simple. And if there are some technical words which are unavoidable, for example, so try to simplify. You can use some bracket information, and there, like, you can give some easy interpretations that people could really understand. These technical words should not be a wall between you and your readers. Second, do not talk in jargon or unfamiliar terms. Of course, as I told you before in the beginning, that columns are not written by reporters. Columns are written, of course, by specialists, by technical persons. So chances are that, jargon floats in. If jargon floats in, you should be on your guard, actually, because you're writing for your ordinary readers, actually. If you are, let's say an economist, for example, you're not writing for other economists, you're writing for me, actually. You're writing for a common man, who you want to educate about economics and economic situation of your country and all. Therefore, try not to speak in your jargon. By the way, of course, jargon, everyone has his own jargon. If I'm a teacher, I have my jargon. If there is an educationist, he has his jargon. If you are, let's say, a journalist, they have their own jargon. And jargons, like, they are different from one profession to another profession, okay? And there is no commonality between these jargons. People at times don't understand. I mean, if you are sitting with a scientist, for example, you will not be able to understand his language, unless he attempts to simplify, like, all those terms and, terminologies, then of course you will, otherwise of course not. This is what jargon speaking. So columnist is not supposed to, like, speak or talk about or explain things, in their own respective jargons. They have to speak, for a common reader, an ordinary reader who can understand, very obviously, like, simple things. Next comes, do not talk about one topic constantly. That will be, of course, monotonous. From very first sentence to the last sentence, you are harping on the same thing. That's for circular approach also. There should be a wonderful progression in your, column, that you are leading the column. You are, your readers are being led, actually. From one point in prospective order, you are moving, towards the end of it through lots of argumentations, lots of descriptions and narrations and all. So don't be monotonous, actually, in your content. Next one is, do not include too much detail or material. You should be stimulating interest, not exhausting the subject. Now, this is a counterpoint. Either you are monotonous or you are exhausting your reader. So try to walk in the middle, right? Which we say, like, try to walk in the middle. That would be, of course, advisable. And the last don't is, refer to yourself as a third person. I mean, this author, your reporter, or quote yourself. I mean, can be your name, for example, Jimmy Jones. If Jimmy Jones is your name, you can, of course, quote yourself. Instead using mine, or instead of using, like, I, in very, very formal setups. But, these days, of course, I mean, it must be in your experience, we do find lots of I columns, where writers actually, they have, started using, actually, first-person stuff and all. Well, point is, as long as, like, you are educating, as long as, like, you are serving the purpose, things are, of course, acceptable. Well, dear students, today in this class, we talked about column writing. And also, in the beginning, we compared and contrasted different journalistic genre. We compared news report with editorial, these two with features, and all these three, of course, with column. And we also came to know that columns are not written by reporters. They are written by, specialists of the field. And these people are, in most instances, outsiders. And outsiders becoming a part of insiders actually is which we call personality of the newspapers. And we also talked about different types of, like, column writing. And, of course, we talked about the process of column writing. And then we discussed how to open your columns in the most effective manner. As far as the body and the closing is concerned, of course, we have it's very much understood. Whatever is your lead, your body has to expand it with the help of your argumentations, your narrations, and your descriptions, and then you have to close. All good columns usually I'm saying end at I would say some quotes, end at some summing ups, or end at some summing up, like facts, for example. So this is how you can do your ending also. In this short time, this is what actually we could talk about. Again, I would suggest you the way I suggested for feature writing. These are not easy things actually to cover up in this little time. I would strongly advise you that please go through your handouts on column writing and try to understand in the real sense, and do practice also. I mean, start writing smaller columns, choose topics, and practice this also. With this, God bless you all. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.